What do these people have in common? Abby Lee Miller, Amber Heard, Jose Baez, stereotypical politician, my estranged brother-in-law, and that one kid in class who made the group project 10 times more difficult than it needed to be, and yet had the gall to try and take all the credit. They all remind me of Mr. Beast. I never watched his videos, so in a lot of ways I don't care about this. However, due to my experiences with specifically those last two people listed, I have a particular fascination with how and why people manipulate others. So when I heard about the Mr. Beast drama, it was just something to have on in the background at first. A few big things stood out to me, specifically things that haven't been debunked, so I got pretty interested. Now that Dogpack has made his videos and had his claims and character questioned, as well as Soggy Cereal and now Oompaville, we're in a weird state of limbo. The interview with Oompaville got a lot of people entirely back on Mr. Beast's side, especially considering it came on the heels of Dogpack's downfall. However, a lot of questions have been left unanswered, and Mr. Beast may very well have planned for it to go that way. Now, I can't confirm anything about his intentions, obviously, but even if he didn't mean to, I noticed a number of manipulation strategies he used in the Oompaville interview. It's fine if you do or don't agree with these things, but let's try to have a little fun learning about the ways people mess with our minds. Timing. It seems strange that Mr. Beast went so long without saying anything about the new controversies popping up. Now, some of it was explained in the interview, being that he was advised legally not to for a time, but to go from no response at all to what Mr. Beast and company did, something about it feels off, and for good reason. First, they worked with Soggy and then did an honest tell-all interview afterwards. This probably wasn't a coincidence. It is so nonchalant, giving off the impression that this really isn't an issue, but more importantly, it plays with our psychology. The significant thing about Soggy's video and it coming out first is that a large majority of it was spent discrediting Dogpack 404, the whistleblower of this whole situation. While some of the claims made against Mr. Beast weren't addressed, or even addressed but not disproven, this served to create a sense of, uncertainty among the Mr. Beast skeptics. How could the allegations against Mr. Beast be true if the person alleging them is proven a liar? Well, Dogpack simply isn't the only person to make allegations. The Beast Games lawsuit, the employees saying that they were uncomfortable at the company, Rosanna, and literally everyone else who's spoken up about this hasn't been disproven yet. And on top of that, not everything that Dogpack alleged has been proven false. But what did this look like to the public? I specifically called Dogpack the whistleblower earlier, but the truth is he was one of many. Did you catch that? Did it stand out to you? If it didn't, you're not alone. It's way easier for our minds to compartmentalize things. That's how we process and organize so much information throughout our lives. While this could be a good thing, like us having an icon of a spider in our minds that allows us to understand what a spider looks like. If we know spider bites can be dangerous, we'll recognize any new kind of spider we see and know, hey, probably not a good idea to touch it. It's a wonderful skill that allows us to understand basic things about the world around us more quickly, but that's also the problem. It's basic. When we are confronted with more complex concepts, this instinctual way of thinking can make us avoid nuance. That's why polarizing political parties exist. We don't really have to limit ourselves to two options, but anything more is complex. We can be polarized and buy into extreme ideologies this way, and that includes subconsciously thinking that if Dogpack is proven untrustworthy and Mr. Beast just spoke up to take accountability, then the opposition, represented by Dogpack, must be bad, and Mr. Beast and company, represented by Mr. Beast, must be good. Oddly enough, Mr. Beast actually uses some of this language to describe things, but more on that later. Essentially, the wrongdoings that Mr. Beast admits to pale in comparison to the lies that Dogpack was caught in. It's no wonder I've seen a lot of people say they forgive Mr. Beast now because he took accountability, even though so many allegations were skipped over. With the Expose video and interview coming out one right after the other, Mr. Beast didn't need to look good. He just needed to not look as bad in comparison, even though there really shouldn't be a comparison at all. Each person should be held accountable for what they did, and that's it. Mitigation and minimization. Admitting that some things were just stupid and I agree I shouldn't have done that, while ignoring lots of big concerns is a means to sweep those unaddressed concerns under the rug. Be it intentional or not, that's what happened. Have you ever seen footage from the Casey Anthony trial? Her lawyer, Jose Baez, has a way of tiptoeing around the evidence. He made a bold move by admitting that Casey's daughter had died, but he refrained every bit of evidence to make it seem like maybe she didn't do it. Anything that made Casey look bad was simply not the big issue that the prosecution made it out to be. Of course, Casey's dad was their fall guy, so how could the prosecution be focused on Casey when her dad, a star witness against her, wasn't a complete saint? Then there was the computer evidence that put Casey at the scene of the crime. The prosecution fumbled and didn't bring it up in court, and when Bias was asked about it in an interview later, he smirked with duper's delight and said that he was surprised they didn't bring it up. Had it been brought into court, that probably would have been like the big thing they couldn't sidestep. All he had to do to allow his client to walk free was muddy the waters, minimize the evidence that was put forward, and offer up some kind of alternative solution to things so the jury had, some sort of reasonable doubt. Did it matter that there was evidence that the child's body was in the back of Casey's car when Bias said that Casey didn't even know if her daughter was dead or alive when her father found her in the pool? Well, no. It really doesn't make sense. But the evidence in the back of the car couldn't possibly prove anything because Bias said Casey simply didn't know. The child didn't intentionally die. It was an accident. The real crime here is covering up an accident, but who's to say it was Casey's idea in the first place? For Mr. Beast, he admits that Delaware had a bad past, but what went ignored is we don't know that Mr. Beast fired him as soon as he found out. If anything, the rumors going around the company about his past while he was still working there make it seem like it was known about for a while. Why the mask when he was in later videos? Mr. Beast said that Delaware wasn't a nickname or twisted joke, that it was just his name. Does that explain the mask? Well, Mr. Beast said that Delaware didn't wear a mask in earlier videos. So we know he didn't wear a mask at some time, the time that Mr. Beast claims he was unaware of the SO charges, but then we don't know why he started wearing a mask or the timeline of when Mr. Beast found out about things and let him go. But hey, his real name is just Delaware, and Mr. Beast was too young to know about background checks when he started. It's fine. Deflection. Almost everything that he addressed in the interview was blamed on youth and inexperience, or someone else entirely, like his editing team. To be fair, sometimes we really just are inexperienced enough to not know certain things, or other people make mistakes that we aren't involved with, but we get roped in anyway. But really, that only goes so far. Mr. Beast has been doing this a long time, and with how much he talks about working extensively and studying algorithms, you think he would learn a thing or two. In this case, the only problems coming out now should be ones from many years ago when he was young, and they should have long been remedied. With the Beast games, we see that isn't the case. It's still happening. Abby Lee Miller literally never takes anything on for herself that will damage her reputation. She will blow off everything as being someone else's fault and only take accountability by saying stuff like, "It was my fault to trust you." By all means, she should know how to be a dance teacher and teach her students how to improve, but instead, she dodged responsibility at every corner. Not owning up to the big mistakes, pushing it off on others, or talking about your mistakes in a minimizing way, "I was young," serves to dodge responsibility. It may have been impossible to talk about everything in one interview, but there was so much that Mr. Beast skirted around. I don't necessarily want to go over all of that here, but there's a whole host of things that just weren't addressed or were addressed only halfway. Let's combine this all. A PR move or not, Mr. Beast and his team have had time, and an excuse for that time, to plan out every move and know exactly how to distract people from the real issues. The more distance there is from each accusation and the more time Mr. Beast has to plan out a response, the more likely he is to have a response that is crafted to only give the illusion of responsibility and completeness. Let's think of another famous court case. A lot of us giggled in delight when Camille Vasquez grilled Amber Heard on the stand. She never let up and never let Amber guide the questioning. Under the pressure of the rapid-fire questions, she cracked. She had a plan to appear sad and innocent, but when she lost control over what the jury was paying attention to, that being the evidence that Heard really wanted to scoot around, she just couldn't keep up. This is why a lot of people wished the interview with Mr. Beast was more thorough. When you are presented questions in the moment and have to give a quick answer, relying on the truth is going to be your best bet. Of course, that also means you can very easily get caught up in any lies or inconsistencies if you don't tell the truth. I can't speak to what Mr. Beast or his team did or didn't plan behind the scenes, but would it really be unrealistic for them to try and arrange things so Mr. Beast wasn't under pressure to respond spontaneously in the moment? Going away from the more mechanical side of things, there was something about the way Mr. Beast responded to each question that made it seem like he was trying to remember, which part of the script he was on. The thoughts didn't seem entirely free-flowing. It's not crazy to think that he, would have been working off of an outline for answers for each question ahead of time, but at the same time, wouldn't you be able to speak authentically if you didn't feel you had something to hide? There are arguments for both sides of this, I'm sure, and it's just some food for thought. Of course, it's normal to want to think ahead on what questions you're going to be asked and things like that, but if you're trying to go for authenticity, isn't that a little counterproductive? Shifting blame. Yes, it is fair to be mad at people accusing you of stuff, but it really seemed like Mr. Beast was trying to paint himself as a victim. He caught himself several times by saying, "I'm not trying to sound like a victim," so clearly he recognized the way he was painting the situation sounded a little, woe is me. This isn't to say that every time you call out the way you felt mistreated is inherently bad. On the contrary, it can be very healthy to air things out. The problem comes when you use it to avoid accountability and shift the blame all to another party. My brother-in-law did that a lot, as did that kid from college. During a group project, he got called out for not pulling his weight. The project had several very distinct roles because it was an exercise in working within a large group. So there were things he had to do in his role that, if not completed on time, would halt the progress of everything else. Well, even though we kept asking him to get his part done for like a month, he waited until literally 2-ish hours before he absolutely had no choice but to have it done. That left me with 2 hours to get my other classes done and finish the next step of the project. He was then mad that things were rushed, and when we had to review how things went with the teacher, he said we didn't organize things well, that we let the timing of the project slip, and that we then put all the blame on him, that he was just innocent. To be clear, it was literally an assignment to set the timeline for each part of the project a month in advance, so he had a month to get his part done, but he waited and forced everything else to be finished in 2 hours. Now, that was a messy situation with a lot more going on there, but needless to say, a lot of people working on that project were very pissed off at him trying to push the consequences of his actions on us. For the Mr. Beast interview, there was a subtle shift of blame throughout, like him exaggerating and repeating that people are using the tiniest examples to say he's evil. Doing this is part minimizing, but also creating a narrative indirectly that the other people are the cause of the problem. A lot of people have said that he used his editing team as a scapegoat, and I'll go over in a different section how other YouTubers have gotten tossed in, but this really gave off the impression that the audience is the problem. If you guys didn't make such a big deal about this, then we wouldn't have to talk about these problems. Sure, if no one paid attention to the problem, we wouldn't talk about them, but they'd still be happening because nothing changed at their point of origin. It's a bit like Mother Gothel saying, great, now I'm the bad guy. It's a subtle form of gaslighting. You aren't the problem for noticing the problem. I didn't say that. As CoffeeZilla pointed out, Mr. Beast said, "I did not tell people to go buy Super," in reference to his tweet about Super Crypto Coin. And there's the no doesn't mean no, which honestly needs a whole other video to explain it, and I'll go over it more later. This whole attitude bothers me a lot. Like Miller and then my brother-in-law, he acts like he has plausible deniability simply because he didn't outright say something. That just isn't how language works. We will indicate things through subtext or context that give them meaning. Ever heard the phrase, actions speak louder than words? My brother-in-law said he was being a nice person and a safe space for me, but he said it while very aggressively yelling. This happened because he was accused of being disrespectful to my mother. But he asked if he ever swore in her face or outright told her that he didn't respect her. I said, well, no, you didn't do those things, and by that very narrow definition, you haven't been disrespectful, but you were bad-mouthing her behind her back and insulting her kindness to you, so that still counts. The thing with lying or stretching the truth is that you only have to phrase your lie in a way that you can believe it. Amber Heard said she didn't leak the video of Depp in the kitchen, but his lawyers didn't ask her if she had someone do it on her behalf. Technically, if she didn't hit the send button, she didn't lie. Heck, she even claimed her statement of speaking out against DV and facing our culture's wrath couldn't be traced back to Johnny Depp because she didn't use his name, even though we could all do basic math to figure out, okay, yeah, that was your husband at the time. Mr. Beast said he didn't tell anyone to buy Super, but would he start to squirm if asked, did you influence anyone to buy Super? Making other people your pawns. Let's go back to Amber Heard and her releasing things through the media because she didn't tip the media off about her specific bruise and divorce filing. She tried to cushion the blow by being at least once removed from the acts that got her in legal trouble. If she directly posted any pictures, videos, or things like that, it would seem personal. It would look like a public or intentional attack on Johnny Depp, putting the pressure directly on Heard. If someone else released it, though, well, for a while, that's what happened. It made a lot of people think that things were just so bad for her that the truth inevitably came out. Of course this was going to come out. Of course tabloids were going to pick it up, so it wasn't heard, right? How did the audio of Dogpack's firing get out? It would have looked so bad for the MrBeast company to have directly leaked it. But we know that the only people who had the audio had to be a part of the company. Nobody else had it. Soggy Cereal wasn't in the room to record it, so how did he get it? Even if someone just went rogue for MrBeast and they decided to release it, there should have been a statement from the company saying, hey, someone went rogue and this isn't how we as a company want to operate, because it looks so shady. So, of course, they didn't directly release it. They had Soggy release it. But it had to come from somewhere. We know the point of origin was the MrBeast company, so the question is, who released it and why? MrBeast was very happy to point out that he didn't ask Jake Weddle to release any information, that he had reached out and paid him for stuff afterwards. Honestly, this in of itself wouldn't really seem like much of a red flag, but it does because it really is just, it feels very similar to Ava Chris Tyson saying that Lava had said that no grooming had happened, therefore, my victim can't possibly be my victim because they said they weren't victimized. Of course, Jake Weddle didn't say, oh, well, the things that happened when I was working on the video didn't happen now that MrBeast reached out. It's just, oh, he reached out. Which, if MrBeast was just trying to say, like, oh, I'm working to make right the wrongs that happened, that would have been a little bit different. Again, it's not in of itself a really bad thing, and I wouldn't have picked up on it otherwise, I don't think, but within the greater context of all of this, it just felt like him trying to dismiss something to be, okay, you know what, let's put the Jake Weddle thing to bed because, well, he said that, I reached out, so I'm kind of forcing the words into his mouth that he forgives me and this is water under the bridge, and this accusation, let's put it to bed and forget about it. Now, MrBeast apparently shared Soggy's video with quite a few other creators to spread it around, and this made Soggy feel used. If MrBeast made his own video talking about the allegations, it would have probably been more popular, and honestly, more people probably would have covered it. But for a third, seemingly unbiased on surface at least, party to come forward and debunk MrBeast's enemy and defend MrBeast in some way, that makes it seem like MrBeast is just an innocent guy that needs protecting. Random strangers started speaking up on behalf of those who said they were hurt by MrBeast, but now a stranger was doing the same for him. Clearly, the evidence to clear his name must be obvious if a random stranger could debunk it. If MrBeast defended himself, that's bias, but if a person with no ties to him does it, clearly that's just the truth. MrBeast even said he wanted to do an interview with Oompa to make it more casual because he didn't want to sit down and talk to the camera. While this can certainly be reasonable, we sometimes just have to do things we don't want to do. Honestly, a straightforward video with no distractions addressing everything might have been the only way to convince everyone that he was being honest. Instead, he made Oompa platform a MrBeast response that allowed him to not respond to a lot, the heat of which went on to Oompa for not being a good interviewer. Instead of a MrBeast apology video, we had this interview, which is just so casual and stuff that it's like, well, these aren't really problems, but if you have a problem, it's on Oompa for not talking about it. Now, sure, you probably don't want to associate with, other YouTuber apologies and ukulele wielding memes, or have anyone be reminded of apology videos when watching yours addressing allegations against you, but that also makes it seem like it's a way to avoid apologizing. Honestly, for the things that MrBeast said were true and dumb, it never once felt like he was sorry for any of the problems he caused. But of course, the pressure isn't on him alone anymore when we can blame Oompa for the response not being enough. Maybe it's because Oompa didn't ask him to apologize. I don't know. But hey, now we're so distracted we're talking about other people and not just MrBeast. Belittling. I've seen a few people commenting that they felt like MrBeast was belittling his critics during the interview, saying things like they didn't understand how big his company is or how a big company works. Of course, we know it's not just him and his friends. It's because the company is so big now and we understand that it needs to be held to a higher standard. Beast Games wasn't a couple of friends playing around in their backyard. If he's so proud that it's the biggest game show ever, then the production value, in terms of organization and safety, not just looks, needs to be higher than it is for any other game show. This came up a lot with the no does not mean no thing from the handbook. Dear MrBeast, most of us did not miss that it was talking about a business strategy. We read the title and the paragraph below it in tandem. The problem is that a big company would use a joke like that in a work document, and that the example given included pushing someone to bend the rules and risk their job for you, and that you talked about only wanting A players with no work-life balance, and that there were accusations of pushing drugs to get people to work more, and that there were several allegations of offenders working for you, and several women have said there were sexual jokes made at the company all the time, including someone being asked how they'd respond if you SA'd them. That's the problem. This is minimizing and leaning on the I didn't outright say but people are accusing me of strategy. But then when you had to belittle the audience on top of that, I've seen so many YouTubers now reacting to that clip of MrBeast saying it was dumb, people were running with this to make me look evil, and they often will use that language and dismiss it as
MrBeast haters being dumb because they didn't realize this was talking about a business strategy, and MrBeast isn't saying go and, take what you want from people in a sexual way.
It's a joke about SA coming from a company with multiple accusations of rewarding those who push past other people's boundaries, be it in a sexual way or otherwise. That isn't a joke. So many things haven't been talked about. Perhaps the biggest red flag is that there are simply so many things that MrBeast has avoided talking about. If he was asked about it in an interview, he just talked a big circle around it. When it comes to Delaware, his name being a nickname or not, it doesn't matter. Was he a part of videos after MrBeast found out about his past? We don't know, because he didn't talk about when Delaware was fired, but he did talk about the Reddit posts that tried to point out his name was just that, a name. I've heard some people say that it was taken off of the thread because it was moved to another one, and that was all explained on the Reddit page, but I don't use Reddit, so I have no idea if this is true or not. Either way, MrBeast didn't talk about a lot of things. Granted, again, it would probably be impossible to cover everything in one interview, but why were the most controversial points danced around? I think it would be better to go over this in more detail separately, so I'm not even going to attempt to break it all down here. However, if there's anything I have learned from watching manipulative people at work, it's that sometimes they have no better strategy to get out of something than simply never talking about it in the first place, and they just hope they can keep distracting you so that way you never catch on. If you made it this far, thank you so much for listening in. I really appreciate it. Feel free to leave a comment on any thoughts you have on this, be them you agree, you disagree, whatever. Like and subscribe if you want to. I will probably have a few more things to say about MrBeast because there's a lot that I find very concerning about this topic. So thank you very much and have a good day.